Snezhnaya is here. Be afraid. New region releases are always fascinating. All types of players come back, old and new. But the biggest thing to come from this is knowing that Genshin will continue to exist, which, depending on which type of person you are, can be either positive or negative. And I'd like to take a moment to complain about a lot of the things that have happened so far. I will be avoiding talking about the new region for now, because I feel like everyone should be able to experience this firsthand and form their own opinions, and I still need to finish it. But for now, I think we should look into the past and see everything that's happened up until now. Let's reflect, and I think I want to reflect upon this in two parts. One, talking about the story, and two, talking about gameplay. Once we establish these past records, with this we can see if we should raise any concerns going into Snezhnaya and also future versions of it. But let's not forget we also have another region that we've been teased about, Khaenri'ah. Typically, when people talk about the story, they talk about how boring, flat, or uninteresting it is, or even how some characters are problematic. Some people hate certain characters and regions, and some people hate them more. But let's do something different here, and let's actually talk about the story. I would argue, regardless if you hate or like a certain character / region, they are all fundamentally important. Specifically important to the traveler because the entire Archon quest journey is about the traveler recontextualizing their journey through Teyvat versus their sibling. As we know from the specific traveler quest and from Dane himself from previous videos, where he directly asks us if we have understood the meaning of our journey and to step aside and defeat him to save our sibling. Again, our journey is not one about finding our sibling anymore. While they may have been the case before, we have found them and we have seen them refuse to come back at first, wanting to handle the issues of the gods in Khaenri'ah. When we encounter the Loom of Fate, they tell us that it requires memories in order to function, and with that we need to feed it as many memories as possible when relating to growth, bliss, change, loathing. Like Dane says, the Loom of Fate will be ours to reweave. Putting that aside, we generally now know what our journey is about now. This story is how we see people develop and grow, saving those memories and being able to prove that those who oppose humanity, that humanity has its right to exist. Hell, the first few words when we start the game is how the sustainer of heavenly principles tells us that the arrogation of mankind ends now. Which is why I say all the characters we meet are important and how we interact with them and see them grow and develop. While I'm not the biggest fan of Natlan, I think it is very important that we saw Natlan develop the way we did regardless if it was rewritten. Especially after Fontaine, as we see how the authority figures handle their nation's fate, as one has the power and means to do so while letting their people know the dangers, versus one being powerless, playing a role, keeping most of what their future holds a secret in order to protect them from it. Even in the case of Columbina, people like to argue that she's just another wife-bait character, but I'd like to ask a question here. Regardless if she was rewritten or even if this is how she was planned from the start, is the version of Columbina we have fitting for the purposes of the story? I believe for the reasons I have just talked about up until now, I would say yes. Allow me to elaborate. So far with the Harbingers, we typically associate them with being the villain as they work for the Tsaritsa. However, not all of them are native to Snezhnaya. They come from all around Teyvat and have some grudges against how humanity has treated them. So in the case of most of them, they use the organization as a way to push their own grey agenda. Except for Columbina. She is someone who was manipulated into joining because of her longing for a family she was denied from. And this is where the previous question comes up. It is easy to discard people if you generalize them into a category, but what happens when someone who is truly innocent is being taken advantage of no less 10 feet away from you? Like, imagine if your little brother or sister is a Lowen fan, would you still think of them as human? Columbina sets this very important precedence onto the other Harbingers as someone who shouldn't be here and what she means to them. Do they continue to do their job even if it means potentially hurting someone who, again, doesn't deserve it? And what does it say about their characters when interacting with her? Do the means justify the end? I know it's a small scene and probably doesn't give that much information as I'm presenting it to be, but I thought it was pretty interesting how when we see others interact with Columbina, especially in the Tea Party scene, seeing how the Harbingers that are good are here surrounding her with Sandrum, and how the other Harbingers like Dottore, Scar, Pantalon, the short one, are not here. Two of them, Dottore and Scara, pre-Sumeru, are the ones that wouldn't really care if something were to happen to Columbina on an empathetic level. Dottore we know would use her for experiments, and this also gets reflected across the others, how Arlecchino, Child, Capitano, to an extent Sandrum, how we are able to connect with them and our journey since they are able to do their mission and talk to other people without, treating us like an enemy or even a pest in their way. I choose my words carefully here since sometimes they will manipulate us for either good or bad, like Dottore who tried to get us to join him in the destruction of all humanity while Arlecchino did it to protect her children. But I think people would forgive Arlecchino more because of her motives, and generally people are down bad for her too, so take the good with the bad. As you can see, these developments are important. However, this is where one of the main issues comes up in Genshin, which I call the banner/event problem. Genshin has a lot of characters, and we need to witness the development of them. So how do we split them up? Well, typically when a version comes out, our main focus will be the on-banner character, which whatever. Hoyo is a company and they need to sell characters and also finish their story. You're killing two birds with one stone. The issue is sometimes we don't get enough time to have proper development or any at all, in the case of Kenichi, where in the main story quest, as this Reddit thread talks about, how they felt about his little involvement during the version at the time. Oftentimes, I personally feel as many of these developments are rushed too, never getting any time to properly explore what change or growth they may be experiencing. It's a shame too, because some of these characters have in-depth backstories that are being rushed for the purposes of having time for the next batch of banner characters, or hell, even the Archons. I mean, yeah, they're pretty much the cornerstone of every nation, so they should get proper developments, but even then, sometimes it can feel like they're being rushed or the pacing is too off. Take the ending to Fontaine, for example. I love the story, narrative, and presentation-wise, but you're telling me when the tides finally rose and the Fontaine people were at risk at being drowned out by the sea, it just quickly disappeared? No less in the same cutscene? This is just kind of a small tangent because it doesn't really relate to the problem I previously talked about, but I want to nitpick about this part just for a moment. I really did think the cutscene was impactful, and I don't mean to take away from it, but come on man, at least in Natlan we took some time to see how the Abyss War was going on, and we actually spent time going around doing objectives to save people. Imagine if the scene where the Abyss attack starts and then in the same cutscene we see Mavuika use her powers alongside everyone else to shatter the Abyss core. It would suck! Hell, let's even reverse it. What if after the tides rose we took some time going around, maybe in a ship or underwater, to help some people, recover some items, just interact with the world even more. But no, we did not get any time to sit with the event that just took place, and as far as it was concerned, the development of the story and Furina's was wrapped up, and that's all that matters. Get your banner out and watch as people pull. Well, not really. I lied a bit there, as Furina's does have a story quest that continues her development too, and that's another thing too, story quests about characters. Not every character gets the spotlight in the Archon quest, and if the Archon quest of the region has already concluded, you are less than human. The biggest contender of this is Emily, which I feel like most people forget about her, and her story quest isn't even that bad too. Again, I'll bring it up every time it's relevant, how we as the traveler need to see these characters' developments. Here in this quest, Emily is looking for her old master, Edgar, to find out how someone was able to replicate the legendary perfume called August, which was long gone, now making a new appearance, wanting to find him since this perfume is dangerous. We learn from this quest how the main villain, Kiria, who took over the identity of Edgar using a delusion to age himself rapidly, a nice callback, and continues to enforce that these are not tools to be used to get his revenge on Sylvain for helping him make the original perfume and then kill himself with the perfume. Here we conclude how Emily was able to recreate the perfume without the dangerous ingredients, making it so Kiria and Sylvain who drank it survived the ordeal, and finally Kiria being able to face his justice by going to prison. That's all fine whether or not you care about Emily or not. Here's something to question. What if the traveler never did the quest in the first place? Should we still use the information if it ever becomes relevant in the future? It sounds kinda dumb, and it is, because I feel like most people would say, well, you should have done the quest if you wanted the information about it. But what if we literally cannot? Here comes the event portion, because as you know, the main flagship events have story quests within them. This is more of a problem with the 4 stars really, since they stopped doing hangout events, since credit where credit is due, the last 3 major events that were tied to either a region or a 5-star characters, you can at least do their questline for. Bennett, Zabai, Sandrum, these are quests you can experience. But what about previous events too, where we get some pretty important information about Durin and Alice, 2 very important characters who were teased a lot back then. Durin being the biggest elephant about this, since we learned about him all the way back in 1.4 with the snow event with Albedo, and the festering desire being the first thing we take about him that relates to him. Some of these moments are important to see the development cycle of Durin. I think the Fontaine and Natlan event in between being one of the bigger ones, where we can see how Skara and Durin first meet and them connecting to eventually lead back into Notcry, was something I wish new players could witness, but no, it's locked behind a limited quest from a past version event. Again, even if you don't care about the characters and their backstories, it can be a hindrance narratively, like with Alice. In another Reddit post, Paimon talks about how we should already know Alice and acting all chummy. If you did not play past summer events, it can be confusing why she trusts us, since we built this trust with Klee in most of these past events. So again, why does Alice trust us outside of being a descender or even having to do with Klee in her 1 story quest? It just doesn't make much sense how one experience can make one of the more powerful entities in Teyvat trust us, again, outside of the limited events from the past. At the very least, we do connect with them later down the line and know about their existence, so all is well, right? Well, remember what I said earlier, how this is a problem for a specific group? Yeah, 4 stars get no love whatsoever. They even stopped doing hangout events since Lynette, so you can't even experience them all that much nowadays. It is genuinely sad to see how mistreated they get, since one recent example is Prune. If you did not do the little Hexray event, you would genuinely not know who this person is or what they are about. The witch's homework kind of helps with this, but not really, mostly just being there to, I don't know, lock the buffs so you have something to do. You gotta work for your buffs, man. We can't just give them out for free. I believe they don't even get mentioned outside of the homework, so if you did not do the event, you would not know who this person is again. So correct me if I'm wrong. Lanyan, Gaming, Xinyan, Yao Yao are just some of the people we never meet outside of Lantern, right? And these are characters that we have played with for a while now. At the very least, they are mentioned in Zubai's Lantern Rite quest that you still can do so. It's at least a consolation prize. My personal experience with this was with Aoife, because for me, he was one of the more anticipated characters for Natlan. You see his charming smile outside of the specialized hospital for Saurians, Auroron, baby girl, the way he would hold him into high regard for his friend, and most importantly, his little hat on his portrait, because I love my cowboy-esque characters. And when he finally released into the game, guess what? He is killed on release because of a niche 4-star who specializes in electrocharge/swirl reaction. And besides the interlude quest and Natlan summer event portion, which, you know, take a win when you can. But goddamn, imagine being so hyped for a character only for them to be released as a 4-star, and they just get nothing. I mean, sometimes you get some good 4-star characters like Cheverus with Mavuika, but even seeing a good 4-star nowadays that doesn't get replaced is rare, which is a good talking point and finally bridges us to our second part. Alright, so there is a lot to say here, and I already took my time talking about some random shit in the last part, so let's just quickly go over some of the points here that I have the most issues with. Number 1, have we outgrown the 4-stars? Just as a heads up, I will be doing a lot of comparisons in this section, and I will do my best to explain the comparisons. 4-stars are generally talked about as being a net positive. They are usually simple that bring something needed to either a team or a niche. Cheverus wanting only Pyro and Electro but providing powerful res shreds. Lanyan being a general shielder with an emo so she's able to provide the VV effect. Eonsan being heavily favored in Verus and Mavuika teams for her powerful attack buffs. There's no debate about that. However, when we do talk about some of these 4-stars, we typically talk about them at a C6 level. And trust me, some of these C6s lock very powerful buffs. Besides a 4-star just never getting any attention in the main story, there's also a very important issue with the 4-stars gameplay wise, and that is that they reach their power limits very fast. 4-stars are the ones you guaranteed after 10 pulls, so they aren't that uncommon unless you're one of those people with horrendous luck with 4-stars, like I am. In the worst possible case scenario, when you lose 180 pulls to guarantee a 5-star, you are looking at 18 4-stars or 3 C6 4-stars at max, or 18 flutes that you just have no use for. Again, using this very extreme example, when we do get our 3 C6 characters, what happens now, even if it's very unlikely to happen? Well, that's just kind of it, you know, you can't really have much more power than a C6 unit, and that's kind of the issue, because what if your favorite character is a 4-star like Eonsan or Aoife? Using my personal favorite as an example, Aoife, I was looking forward to this character, and even if they kept the same gimmick that they have right now in the kit, there's really not much more I can do for him other than getting his teammates. But at that point, if I'm really pulling enough in Columbina just to make Aoife work, is he really a unit, or is he just sitting in a cuck chair watching everyone else do the work? If Aoife was a 5-star, at the very least, I could keep pulling constellations to make him more powerful, and it's not like they're afraid to overload the constellations too. I mean, look at the differences between the cons of a 4-star and a 5-star. These techs are massive! So I'm just supposed to accept at a C6 level that the only addition is 1 extra charge? Come on, man. Meanwhile, Columbina adds so much to not just her kit but her teams as well, and this is just at C1. They're not afraid to give more than what they deserve, since in each edition, constellations will elevate the damage of any lunar reaction. All this talk of 4-stars makes me believe that why don't we just stop making new 4-stars, and why don't we just buff old 5-stars, and hell, maybe give us selectors so we're able to play around with them as well. In Honkai Star Rail, and a game also made by Hoyo, they made a choice to stop making 4-stars after release of most. Some people at first found to be negative, but I think as more time goes on, it was a very positive thing. One example is that they started to frequently buff more older characters, so if you had owned them, you had at minimum someone usable again. While not all of them lasted, I think the fact that they were paying attention to the characters with weak kits in the modern game gives players who love these characters a reason to use them again, which unfortunately it's not something 4-stars are typically given unless in the case of Genshin, it's made to help with a new gimmick. Not all characters that are buffed have to be DPSs to bring back some meta relevancy. Some of these characters are very vital in team building, such as Sparkle. Back in July of 2025, Honkai Star Rail released their Fate collab, releasing a free unit called Archer. Archer is somebody who wants to use many skill points at once, and it just happened to be that Sparkle was able to provide those skill points needed. And then this year, with the release of Planetaria, they buffed Sparkle. They made her into an amazing general supportist. They also reworked her kit so she no longer needs Mono Quantum in order to function, giving ATK buffs unconditionally alongside with some res pen. Hoyo could have just let her be a support for just Quantum characters, but instead they took the time to rehaul her kit and make her amazing. Admittedly, it was probably for the release of Sparksy, who already wanted to consume a lot of skill points. And if you didn't notice, they're not Quantum either. But I digress, as this shows that what we can have versus what we get. In the case of Zenless Zone Zero, the last 4-star they released was Monito, someone who's used as an introduction to the new agent archetype being Rupture. That of course being after Yixuan, but let's ignore her for a second. Rupture is a class that uses Sheer Force, which ignores defense percent at a scale rate of HP percent. Wow, using a 4-star as a gateway to introduce a new mechanic, even if mediocre. Since then, in both games, we don't really care about 4-stars in favor of being able to build your favorite 5-stars and little risk of them being redundant. Sorry, Monito fans. Wouldn't this be great? Your favorite being able to have a much bigger power ceiling, even if you are opposed to 4-stars being discontinued because of team diversity or having easy access to a certain element. There is another reason to can them, and that's wishes. If you don't know, when you max out a character, you get something back, usually in the form of premium currency to use in the shop. Star Glitter, Undying Starlight, Residual Signal. These are used as refunds after maxing out a character. In the case of 4-stars, you get a maximum payout of 5 in Genshin or 20 in Honkai Star Rail or Zenless Zone Zero. These are exactly enough for one pull, using the extreme example of losing your 50-50 and getting 4-stars along the way. You would be looking at 90 Star Glitter, which is enough to get 18 pulls refunded. And if you want to go further, technically 19 pulls, since you could use those 10 pulls for another 4-star pity. That's almost 20 pulls refunded after losing your 50-50, which by Genshin standard, that's a lot. Getting this amount of pulls is pretty average for exploring a region, so all for the price of not having a 4-star, you would get this. This next part's more of a conspiracy theory than anything, but something that the 4-star situation that I kind of believe too is that it gives them a reason not to give us a selector too. This isn't proven by any means, but I believe as long as they keep us on a leash by giving us 4-stars that are easily accessible, they don't have any reason to give us any 5-stars that are selectable or free. Something to come out of this is, ironically, I think this hurts them as a business more, because they don't give us a reason to pull old characters. I said it before, but I think it's pretty funny how the majority of old characters don't get any adjustment to their kits unless it's to support a new gimmick. Hexarai and Stellar Conduct being the two elephants in the room. And the weirdest thing too is how when buffed, we don't get many opportunities to obtain them. Again, in the case of Star Rail, the majority of the buffed characters we were able to obtain for free or in the 50-50 lost pool. For this section, let's focus on the characters we got so far for free: Sparkle, Jingliu, and Kafka. First and foremost, obviously, if you did not have any of those characters, 1, you could either choose one of your favorites, or 2, whichever you're best from the count. It doesn't really matter because you were able to select them for free. With these kit adjustments, they also buff some of the Eidolons to make them even better. With this, you were given more of a reason to continue to pull on these characters since they were usable again, and 2, they locked some pretty good buffs behind these Eidolons too. Sparkles and Kafka's E1s are alright, but their E2s are pretty damn good. Jingliu is just being whatever, but if you still really wanted to make her work, you could always pull for her more since she's not as bad as she was before. This is a very smart business choice, as admittedly a bit scummy as it prompts FOMO, but hell, I'll take it if it means being able to use older units more. I imagine many people saw the buffs during the Hexarai era and saw how it affected their kits. One of the more interesting ones being Venti, as it turned him into a DPS alongside some more support capabilities. This may be wishful thinking, but I imagine more people would have pulled for him or his weapon if he was given for free, so if you had him before, you would have that Venti at Constellation 1, and guess what? E2 is a pretty funny gimmick. It turns him into a proper hard-hitting DPS. By not giving us a chance to choose these characters, you're losing more than you gain by gatekeeping because, again, you don't give us a reason to pull. Why would I pull Radiant on this banner? She's not that good anymore, and even in recurrent teams, there are other units that do it better. Hell, Bishal does it better, a 4-star, someone that was here day 1, all from her buffs. Not a new 4-star, an old one. You would have to be a diehard Radiant fan to do so, and even then, are you really going to rely on a character being someone's favorite just to justify a rerun like this? How much of an impact is giving out Ito for free, or Yelan, or Kazuha? Someone who isn't even on the free Constellation selector. Just make it so you can claim a character for free. Why do we even have to own them in the first place? What is so good in these characters' kits that they can't justify giving them out for free? The greatest tragedy of a character just not being that good and not being given out for free is Tartaglia. Everything in his kit is terrible. Nothing in these passes for constellations help him in his own power or power of his teams. When you pull for a character and they're dupes, you expect something in return, but no. All of these constellations are genuinely things that nowadays would be in a skill set, not even wasting a slot in a passive. And I fell for it. Twice! This guy right here, this is the first ever brick to ever come into Genshin. And what, you're afraid to add this man to your 50-50 loss pool? You think giving out this man for free is going to break the meta? There are many reasons why some of these characters should not be continued to be limited. Just give us a store for characters, since Masterless Star Glitter is such a nothing burger addition. Surprise, surprise, we have another Reddit post on the value of these Masterless Star Glitters. Here they talk about how it's just not that big of an upgrade when we look on the benefits they give us. The TLDR of this is that many of the biggest winners from these buffs are ones that come from transformative reactions such as Overload, Shatter, Electrocharge, Superconduct, Swirl, Burning, Bloom, Hyperballoon, and Virgin. These are pretty big buffs for the units who use them and not that much of the ones who don't use them. For me, breaking the level ceiling is something that's always cool, and I would always go out of my way to do so. But the rewards for maxing out a character and seeing how the other two games give us a shop with previous characters that have fallen off or genuinely replaceable, I'd rather just have the shop. I have something bitchy to say. Unfortunately, these two things combined make for the worst possible outcome since we do need more 4 stars and the lack of outdated 5 stars not being given out makes me believe that Stygian Onslaught isn't the worst game mode Imaginary Theater is. This mode is terrible. One of the issues with this mode is in all 3 games you need a max of 3 teams to clear any endgame mode, 12 characters or 9 in Zenless. None overlap. At the highest difficulty in Imaginary Theater, you need 28 characters to even enter, which is 7 teams individually. Now granted, you can use each character twice, however there is another problem. 28 characters meteorically built wasn't enough draining resources, but you will be restricted to 3 elements a cycle. So you'll need 28 characters and they better match up with the current cycle patches because if you're not, you don't deserve to play. They know some of the characters aren't the best here, so what they do to help us is they help us by buffing certain reactions. The buffed reactions will always relate to the 3 elements currently in the cycle. A common argument for these types of endgame modes is that you don't have to do them, and I can understand saying that with Stygian, you don't have to challenge Dire, let alone Fearless and Menacing, as the Primo Gems rewards only go up to hard. But with Imaginary Theater, you are missing out on some Primo Gems by not doing the highest difficulty, as the 2 lunar modes make it so you miss out on 200 Primo Gems, but that's up to you if you want to lose your shit over 200. The cycle choices aren't always the best too, because some of these elements you just do not have enough characters like Dendro or Geo, the majority of them being 5 stars, unless you're a Nemo and a Catalyst. You're never in short supply there. You can't even obtain a Geo standard 5 star. They don't exist. Look. You better pray they don't do another gimmick rotation like they did with Dendro and Cryo, because Lord knows if they ever do a Geo and Dendro, no one's going to be able to clear it. A pretty common strategy for this theater is to use your weaker characters in the first half, since you want to save up the ones that do damage for the last few. So again, why are you worried about people owning a free Ito or Baiju? Quickly moving on, some other complaints that I have from a gameplay perspective is generally the reaction system. Lunar reactions are alright, but they are some of the laziest forms of buff to the system since they just made it so they can crit, have higher multipliers / buffs due to the nature of them ignoring damage percent, which they already do a lot of damage, so it's understandable. What lunar reactions, or more so the characters at least, do is make it so the reactions they are supporting have major upscales, rewarding you by using them. While some characters cannot function without using some dumb restrictions like Kinich or Skirk, it makes no sense that you're restricting their kits for some niche without giving them some type of upside. Kinich does nothing except enable his cannon shots. You allow him to enable the cannon shots, but besides that there's nothing else you're doing for him. The only real upside is that his cannon shots do have a pretty high multiplier. I believe many of the lunar DPSs would just be mediocre at best if they did not have this innate passive within all of them. Skirk is already showing her age. At least when you use her archetype that she wants you to use, you are boosting her normal and burst damage, but that's nothing insane. Now you take a character like Mavuika, who in her kit already gives so much to her and her teammates, with Night's burst giving attack and her burst giving more damage percent to the active party member. If you give it DPS flexibility, that is a healthy unit. When you restrict a DPS, you get dog shit. Another problem with these restrictive DPS kits is often you have to make a dedicated support just for them. Let's take an example with Emily and Escoffier. Emily, I'll be honest, is a bad example, but still one of Kenichi's best in slot units, at least in the past, since she was the only one to give a shit about burning reactions. That seem familiar? And besides that, no res reduction until C2, which by the way is the only thing that assists her team's damage, everything else is her own personal damage. You just kind of get this awkward unit that you can't really use anywhere else except inside one team, and now she's already getting replaced. In the case of Escoffier, who only reduces the res of Cryo and Hydro based off the number of those units in your team up to a 55% res reduction for both elements, which is again the freeze reaction. It's not explicitly stated, but Escoffier was designed to be partnered with Skirk, who generates her void rifts from freeze. But it's not all so bad. The captain has to go down with the ship after all. But every story needs a Christ figure. Silali and Dern are just wonderful units. These units also want specific reactions such as melt or any pyro reaction, but they buff them pretty damn well. With their elemental res reductions already being innate in their kit, they also do some pretty important application as well. So again, you have these units that are tied to certain restrictions, but they are far much better, and if you pull either of these units, you aren't strictly using them for another unit. Silali makes it so any pyro user can be top tier, allowing for some disgustingly strong melts, with a shield to go alongside with it. Durin being a highly contested unit, since anyone that uses a pyro reaction inside of their team can benefit from him. Nicole, God bless her soul, gives a nice attack buff to anyone, and she does such little application that you don't really need to worry about her messing up your rotations. You take a look at units from Inazuma, and man, they are just dead in the ditch. The only surviving member of the Inazuma arc being Yae Miko, because she has been slotted into the niche of Stellar Conduct, her new home and permanent home. With that all being said, I don't expect this region to be perfect for the reasons I just listed, from developments being rushed or not explained upon, the potential of having a section being rewritten and not fitting the current journey through Teyvat, and the general kit ideas from characters when not using the current strongest content, we are heading for where not every unit feels like they have a proper place or just get mushed together because of this dumb mode. So, a final question. If all of the active issues like everyone and their mothers say when talking about a conclusion to a Genshin criticism video, will I still play despite all the bitching? Of course! Remember the title of this video? Only bums will like Snezhnaya? That bum? It's me! I believe despite its flaws and questionable game choices that they make, I will keep playing this game until it ends its service because I genuinely love this game. One of the biggest flaws with criticisms, at least in this community, is they generally come from a place of frustration or hatred, which you're allowed to feel those feelings, but don't allow it to dictate your actions all the time. As I said, I only discussed the matters that I felt were under discussed or some of the ones I find more irritating. Like I could have made a whole other section about this dumb ball. Not only does it favor stellar reactions, but they also made it so these things hover, so Sandrum has the easiest time and other units can go to hell. You can have shield content, but when you choose a gimmick, choose one gimmick, not two of them. Some other issues like how much of a fraud Revere and Dainsliff were, Dane only appearing when his standard boyfriend are on screen, and Revere wasn't even all that threatening, man. Like come on, compared to Dottore, someone who kicked our asses not once, not twice, but thrice. Again, I'm sure Dainsliff only cares about the sinners, but if that's the case and he never wants to help us, why do we even care about him? Some of the outfits of the female characters I don't like because as a fat man who likes talking about this game makes me feel like this when discussing the game. As you can see, many of these criticisms can be argued against if you have any debate experience, but the best criticisms of anything will always come from the people who love the game and want to see it grow, not from somebody who fell out of love with it or has always hated it from the start. Oftentimes people direct their anger on social media, but Genshin does have a button for you to submit your feedback to. Now let's be real, sometimes this button feels like a button that does nothing. Regardless, you should send your feedback, both positive and negative. While Hoyo is a company designed to make money, they want to make the most amount of money, and the only way to keep doing that is to keep their player base from leaving. So submit what you really think, allow them to read your feedback instead of just screaming into a large field. If you don't think that'll help, something that helps me too if you feel jaded with Genshin is to compare it. I also think comparisons in a healthy way can make you appreciate the things Genshin offers too. Like I praise Starwheel for having a pretty decently healthy meta, but it is by far annoying when it comes to the storytelling. Like why does this sequence when the Trailblazer loses, it suddenly cuts to a previous point where it's like, this is what's actually happening and this is when shit goes down. And they threw it 3 times! And don't even get me started on Zenless Zone Zero. Season 2 was such a mess that even in the deadblock they made, they addressed this issue as well. You don't ever see a company that made a mistake unless it's a big one because pride is a sin after all. Yeishengwang. I love this character, but my goodness, her part in the main story was so poorly done. People like to complain about Columbina, but I implore you to watch what Yeishengwang was doing during her main section, and the good part of her story is in an event. This was just hard to sit through. I think for once I considered hitting the skip button during a main storyline quest. I adore the combat of Zenless, but it is by far so frustrating trying to do so. It's not for the weak. I'm the weak. So being able to sit back and just enjoy the gameplay loop that Genshin is, not having to worry about all these stun rotations, it's a breath of fresh air. Doing 3 gacha games while painfully financially lets me appreciate what each game gives me as a player who wants to experience these worlds. While Archon quests are probably not even my top 5 reasons why I look forward to a new version anymore, I think the world quests are done beautifully. I don't think there's a single world quest that I hated. Even the Arnara one, which you know is a layer of hell. Project Moongazer, any of the Netline quests with our little guy, and of the... yeah. These never disappoint me and often are the quests I look forward to doing the most. And with Snezhnaya coming up, it might be my favorite region. I am a sucker for snowy regions. I just love the winter theme so much, and the night skies. I almost wanted to major in astronomy till, you know, I learned it requires physics. Even this character looking the most interesting for me. This man reminded me of my sweet Misha. Oh, Watchmaker, rest in peace. He will be the one I look forward the most during this region. I don't hate Genshin. Even at its lowest points, I will continue to play and engage with this game, and you shouldn't feel bad about doing that. People will always have something to say about Genshin, and that's okay if you engage in healthy discussion, talking both positive and negative. You'll continue to feel fulfilled with this game. I know I have. One of my favorite things from the community are slander posts, because they oftentimes it is really funny, but most of the time it also presents the issues that these characters have in one of the purest forms. So while we go into the new region, talk about the things you adore and despise. But more importantly, this is a game, so have fun with it. Games are designed to be played and talked about, so don't be ashamed about doing so. This game will be here to stay. Look at the Teapot and Millie Astrid mode. These are modes that are designed to stay. So no matter what they add, remove, or forget, I think it's in our best part to help it grow as much as we can and enjoy it for all it's worth.